أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال إبراهيم لأبيه آزر أتتخذ أصناما آلهة إني أراك وقومك في ضلال مبين وكذلك نري إبراهيم ملكوت السماوات والأرض وليكون من الموقنين فلما جن عليه الليل رأى كوكبا قال هذا ربي فلما أفل قال لا أحب الآفلين فلما رأى القمر بازغا قال هذا ربي فلما أفل قال لئن لم يهدني ربي لأكونن من القوم الضالين فلما رأى الشمس بازغة قال هذا ربي هذا أكبر فلما أفلت قال يا قوم إني بريء مما تشركون إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. MashaAllah, usually I have to ask again because people are sleeping, but you guys seem to be awake even though it's late in the evening. The topic I was given is entitled something on the lines of I didn't choose to be a Muslim. And I want to divide my conversation with all of you into three parts. The first is to understand where this question comes from and why this question is asked and why it's asked in this age and who might ask it. And is it really a bad thing that this question is asked? The second part is to explore how do we answer the question? How do we respond to these questions? How have these questions been responded to in the past? And lastly, is how do we grow and how do we strengthen and how do we enhance our iman in the age where everybody's iman is really under attack. So let's start with the first part of the question. I can start with the personal experience. One of many personal experiences. When I was working at the University of Nottingham in the UK, in a pastoral care kind of role, where I was leading the salah, but also I had office hours to answer the questions of young Muslims at university. And the University of Nottingham has a large Malaysian student population because there's a branch over here in Malaysia. There's a large exchange program. And in the evenings when I would have office hours, I'd get two types of students. I'd get students who came, who have a question about something related to their practice of Islam. Can I bleach my hair? Can I do this? Can I trim my eyebrows? How do I pray salah when I'm on an aeroplane, etc., etc. And usually the conversation will begin like this until eventually they begin to reveal what's really bothering them once they close the door of the office. And then the suicidal thoughts and the depression and the anxiety and the doubt and the existential crisis all comes out. And what I was surprised to find was that the people who had the most unsettled iman were the people who grew up in Muslim countries and who now found themselves in a Western institution in the United Kingdom studying engineering or medicine or geography or physics or philosophy or psychology or something else. And they happened to be in a classroom let's say studying medicine, innocently studying medicine, and in the anatomy class, the teacher begins to talk about evolution. And suddenly they feel there's a big question mark about their faith. Or they're sitting in an engineering class and suddenly their lecturer begins to speak about the beginning of the universe and suddenly there's a question about their faith. Or they're sitting in a sociology class and the lecturer starts teaching them about gender theory, modern gender theory. And they begin to start questioning their faith. What we have to realize, and what I realized from many of such conversations, is that the world has changed so much and far beyond the world of my grandparents and your grandparents. The world of our grandparents and great-grandparents was a world in which cultures stayed separate and would not interact. This is before the World Wide Web, before the internet. Now, I'm in Malaysia and I talk to an international student and he has an American accent and he's bred in Malaysia. Why does he have an American accent? Because he watches Netflix all the time. There's no longer a separation between different parts of the world. It's all one big place, all one global village. And so that means that the ideas of all parts of the world are now swimming in this soup which we find ourselves in. And so a century ago, 2-3 centuries ago, a durian farmer in the corner of Kelantan, it would have been enough for him to teach his children, آمنت بالله ورسوله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله والقدر خيره وشره واليوم الآخر, and move on with life and continue planting the durians properly. And that would have been enough. But in today's day and age, whether you're a young person growing up in the world that we live in with TikTok and social media and YouTube and everything else you're exposed to, or whether you're a parent with a child growing up in this era, the whole game has changed. The world has changed. And with the cross-pollination of ideas, we will not, Muslims, our faith will not survive under attack if we don't develop a force field around this faith and develop a deeper understanding of this faith and a deeper conviction in this faith. Otherwise it will all come apart when it becomes tested. What I noticed from the dozens and dozens and dozens of Malaysian students I encountered in the UK was that many of them grew up with a cultural understanding of Islam. It could have been Malaysian students, it could have been Pakistani students, it could have been Bangladeshi students from any part of the world. They grew up with a cultural understanding of Islam. Islam for them was what my dad did. Salah for them was what my mom told me to do, otherwise she would throw a slipper at me. That was Salah. What was the meaning of what I was saying in Salah? I don't know. Why do I pray? I don't know. And so growing up in this culture where Islam is it is a culture, it's an inherited set of practices. Why do we do it? Nobody knows. That is the definition of culture. An inherited culture is something which when you say, why do we do this? The response is, this is just how we do it. Don't ask these kind of questions. This is how we do things. We've always done things this way. And when you inherit Islam in such a way, without understanding, without rationale, without reasoning, without evidence, without thinking, the moment that that belief gets tested, it will fail. It will break because it's fragile. Allah talks about fragility in the Qur'an. مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, those people who call upon other than Allah, false gods. كَمَثَلِ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ اتَّخَذَتْ بَيْتًا. What they've taken, they thought that they've given themselves insurance with a very safe policy. But instead what they have done is they have built for themselves a spider web. وَإِنَّ أَوْهَنَ الْبُيُوتِ لَبَيْتُ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ. And the spider's house is the most fragile of all houses. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. If only they knew. So for many people, Muslims who inherit their religion as a cultural tradition, like we eat this kind of food, when you go to your uncle, sit this way in his house, and also pray this way. It's all the same. There's no differentiation between custom, habit, and religion. It's all one inherited bunch from your parents. And when it happens in this way, when the tests of the time come against it, it will not survive. This is one reason why this question is asked when a young person or an old person, or it doesn't matter what age, what gender, where you're from, when you ask this question, is I didn't choose to be a Muslim. I feel that Islam has been imposed upon me. I would say that you have asked the right question. Because this question is the beginning of your journey towards certainty. The right question, you see, sometimes there is a knee-jerk response. A young person goes to their parent and says, you know what, I'm not sure why I am a Muslim. And then they get a smack, after which they have, a red marks on their face for the next 6 months. This question is actually the beginning of the route towards certainty. Towards a faith built upon reason, built upon evidence, built upon complete conviction in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than a faith based on inherited culture. And the passage that I recited in the beginning of this talk was a passage where a young boy called Ibrahim alayhi salam begins his own journey, in which he begins to look up at the sky and the world around him, and he begins to wonder. This is obviously before prophethood. One of the two interpretations of these sets of verses. The other interpretation is that Ibrahim alayhi salam is conveying Islam to his people. But what does he do? Ibrahim alayhi salam goes out into the night sky and he looks up. He looks up and he sees a star in the sky. He says, Hada Rabbi, could this be my God? Could this be the Almighty? But when it sets, he says, rising and setting, manifesting and disappearing. This kind of change and this kind of flux and this is weakness. This is a dependent being. Someone else is moving it and making it shine and dark and making it come and go. This is not God. And the next day, he then sees the moon, the bright moon, the full moon in the night sky. He says, could this be God? This is Hada Akbar, this is brighter. This looks more powerful, more meaningful. فَلَمَّا أَفَلْ But when it sets, he says, Allah, if you don't guide me, if you don't show me who is my God, my creator, I'm going to be lost. He then sees the sun shining, and he says, you know what, maybe it could be this. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَتْ But when it sets, he says, no way. He then says, إِنِّي وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِي With a level of certainty, he says, I now turn myself, I direct myself to the one who originated all of these things that are moving in circles, in orbits. To all these dependent objects, I turn myself to him, the one who created all of them. الَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ حَنِيفًا Purely dedicated to him in monotheism. وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ And you'll never find me making equals to him. This journey of Ibrahim alayhi salam with these celestial objects in the sky is a journey of him thinking and reasoning and understanding and questioning. But Allah says, وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ I showed Ibrahim alayhi salam these signs in the universe. وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ For him to reach a level of certainty. Al-yaqeen. Somebody who asked the question, why am I a Muslim? I'm not sure why I'm a Muslim. The reason they've asked this question, we can split it into five factors. The first is environmental. The idea that they may have inherited religion from their environment in a way where they're not sure what's religion and what's cultural practice. It's all one inherited bunch. Where they are told that it's not about, don't worry about the why, just do all of this stuff. The second is psychological, which is a person may be doing something robotically for their entire life, but one day they sit down and they say, why am I doing this? And if you don't know why, in today's world, if you don't know why, especially if young people and children, if they're not taught why they're doing what they're doing, they will eventually question what it is that all of this is about. The third factor that would get, bring somebody to a point of where they question their faith, or why I'm a Muslim, or did I choose my faith, is because their faith, their practice of Islam has been passive. What does passive mean? You see, I go to a restaurant. There's only one thing on the menu. I don't ask questions, I don't look at the menu, I don't check, I don't think. I just put my tray, food's on the plate, I go and I sit down. While I'm standing in line, I'm not thinking. While I put my tray in front, I'm not thinking. Because there's only one item on the menu. I'm a passive observer. I'm just automatically consuming. I switch on my phone. I'm on my YouTube feed. I scroll. The new term they call doom scrolling. You just keep going. It's a bottomless pit. And you keep going and you keep going. You never once ask, why are these the things I've been offered? Why has the algorithm given me these pieces of content? I'm just consuming. I'm passively consuming. In the world that we live in, we have become passive consumers. Meaning, what we do, what we buy, where we live, what we read, what we watch, what we think about, is not an active choice. We just find ourselves, as they say, going with the flow. And if your religiosity was not an active choice at some point in your life, you will come to the day where you will stop and you will think, what's going on? The fifth factor is a factor of trauma. Why do people question their faith or wonder, why am I a Muslim? Or I didn't choose this faith, or what's going on? Is this the truth? Is this not the truth? The number of times, if I had a ringgit for the number of times I came across this situation, I would be a very rich man. What's the situation? Somebody comes to the office, Imam's office, they sit down. A sister with a hijab or a brother with a beard who prays 5 times a day. But he grew up in a household, or she grew up in a household where their parents were always quarreling, fighting, screaming, shouting, broken plates, broken bones, domestic abuse in the household. Divorce, remarry, foster houses. Or this person grew up in a household where one of the two parents was physically excessive with them. Excessively physically abusive to the child. And for some reason, in every single case I came across, it's the more religious parent that tends to be the more physically abusive to the child. The more outwardly religious looking, apparently religious parent. So the same person who's telling this child, pray salah, this is the same person who beats them to shreds in the evening. Now the child did what they did in the household to obey the parents, but they grew up and they have an association of hatred with the Qur'an, or hatred with salah, or anger, or sadness. And until they resolve this, they will always question what's going on. They will have a tension with their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In July, very recently in July, I was in the UK. And I met a brother who was working for a charity. Very lovely brother, though, beard. And we were just talking. And I said, mashallah, you grew up in this part of the UK. This part of the UK is very well known for producing huffaz of the Qur'an, people who memorize the Qur'an. He said, yeah, but because I was beaten to memorize the Qur'an, I memorized the Qur'an and I grew a resentment for the Qur'an. And so I forgot the entire Qur'an. I'm looking at him, I'm saying, you memorized the entire Qur'an and you forgot the entire Qur'an and you have a resentment towards the Qur'an. This is a problem, man. He said, yeah, but I don't know what to do with it. And these people exist, and this is one factor of 5. The reason why somebody might end up asking this question of why am I a Muslim? Am I a Muslim? Why did I choose this faith? Or did it choose me? Or was I chosen? This is the first part. And the real question is, where do we go from here? If ever a child asks a parent such a question, a parent must understand that they should never overreact to such questions. They have to create an environment where these questions are welcome, where these questions receive a warm and a loving response. Because when you create that space where a child feels safe enough to confide into a parent, safe enough to ask questions to a parent, safe enough to question why, safe enough to reason and discuss with a parent, you create an environment where the child is going to learn everything and they're not inheriting blindly, and their understanding of Islam is an understanding of depth, not just an understanding of blind faith and blind practice. The evidence for this is the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam and his relationship with his father Yaqub. The Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam sees a dream And his father is already so approachable in his relationship with him that he feels he's comfortable enough to go to his father and say, I saw a dream. Crazy dream. I saw the stars bowing to me. What does it mean? Most of us have such a distant relationship with our children, or vice versa, that they would never come and tell us their dreams, let alone their interests and hobbies and what cartoons they're watching and what happened at school. As parents, we know that there's a cutoff age. There's a particular age at which, children, as they become teenagers and young adults, they just seem to disappear into Fortnite or the internet, or they become closed off. You sit in the car, pick them up from school. How was school today? Good. What happened? Like last year, 2 years ago, I would say, how was school? And you'd be yapping all the way home. And now you suddenly closed off. I remember I once had a colleague when I was working in an engineering company, a non-Muslim man. He was in his 60s. And he used to bring his son to university, and I used to ask him, how's your son? How's your relationship with your son? He said, after the age of 15, I don't know what happened to him. He went into his room and he never came out. As in, he went into his room and always gaming and always on the computer, and that's it. My relationship with him disappeared. So it's so key to keep that approachable relationship with the parent. And if not, then a young person who has this question, this crisis of faith, this question of identity, of why am I a Muslim? If not a parent, they need a third figure. A sheikh, a mentor, a murabbi, an uncle, an aunt, an older brother, a friend, somebody. Now, some of you might be thinking, and this happens to me sometimes, I give a talk and I mention something about parenting, and then you always have that parent whose kids are in their 30s and they're completely off track, and this person has given up on life. And I say to them, it's not too late. Sheikh, I've got 3 here, you've added a 4th, mathna wa thulatha wa ruba'. But I'm very happy with 1. Bismillah. So the first thing, as we said, is to have this environment of approachability with the child. The second is that whether you're learning the deen or whether you are in a position of responsibility where you're teaching it or you're fostering it in your children, there is one very, very key skill to learn, which is the skill of teaching Iman with reason and with logic. The Prophet's companions, Jundub ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu says, كُنَّا فِتْيَانًا حَزَاوِرَةً حَوْلَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. We were young boys around the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فَتَعَلَّمْنَا الْإِيمَانَ قَبْلَ أَن نَتَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ. We learned Iman before we learned the Qur'an. ثُمَّ تَعَلَّمْنَا الْقُرْآنَ فَازْدَدْنَا بِهِ إِيمَانًا. And then we learned the Qur'an and we increased our Iman. So now, this is really key. Now, a child is 6 or 7. When a parent wants this child to learn something about Islam, the first thing they think is, my child has to read the Qur'an. Go, A, U, I, Ba, Bu, Bi, Ta, Tu, Ti, until this child can read. And when the child can read, in the subcontinent, when a child reads from the start of the Qur'an to the end, for the first time, for us, this child is now Shaykhul Islam. Done. Finish. You don't need to ever learn anything. So there's a whole ceremony, celebration. My child has finished the Qur'an. Habibi, this child cannot explain, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. What do you mean finished? Didn't even start. So the prophetic method was to teach young people Iman before he taught them the Qur'an. What does it mean to teach young people Iman? That means take them to the beach. I'm not joking, take them to the beach. Take a piece of sand and let the sand drop from your fingers. And you say, my child, this sand, do you know it was once a boulder? But the sea slowly eroded away and it became dust like this. And you know, before it was a mountain, a boulder, it was something else. And before that it was something else. And before that it was something else. And before all of it, Allah created it. And one of Allah's names is Al-Khallaq. He's constantly creating. You see the sea? Who moves the sea? Who controls the tide? Look at the precision. Why isn't the sea engulfing us with its power? There could be a tsunami right now. What's holding it at bay? Allah is Al-Hakim, the wise. He puts everything in its place. Then you pick up a shell. You should know, child, this shell, there used to be a crab inside this shell. Look at the beauty, the color, the shape, the size. If I told you that this just randomly came about and popped into existence, would you believe me? No, somebody designed it, right? Who designed it? Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is, when He creates, He is فاطر السماوات والأرض. He designs everything to precision. You weave the names of Allah in your conversations. You lose your job and you come home. There's no rent to pay. You say to your child, you know, my boss who was paying my salary, my boss is an illusion. Your child says, what? My parent today, I don't know what they had for breakfast. You say, no, let me explain. Did you think I was being paid by my boss? No, Allah is the provider, Ar-Razzaq. The boss is just a messenger, postman. He just comes to deliver it, but Allah is the one who sent it. Ar-Razzaq, the one who provides. The names of Allah are the fundamental building blocks that shape the minds of the Sahaba. And for a child, a young person, to understand the deen and to prevent all this identity crisis and gender crisis and all this nonsense later in life, fill your conversations with the names of Allah. The Qur'an that was revealed in the first 13 years, the Meccan period, the early stages of Islam, before there was a government and foreign relations and an army and all of this stuff, was a Qur'an that was filled with the names of Allah. And the companions understood this is the most important topic that we can ever learn. One day the Prophet's companion, Ubay ibn Ka'b, the Prophet ﷺ decided to test him. He came and he asked him, Ubay, what is the greatest verse in the Qur'an? Ubay says, Allah and His Messenger know best. I have no clue. He said, no, try it, give it a go. So Ubay is thinking, imagine how many ayahs in the Qur'an. Does anybody know how many ayahs in the Qur'an? Over 6,000 verses, and you have to pick one. I can't even pick one of these 4 bottles to drink water from. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ is asking you, pick the best verse in the Qur'an. He's thinking. I got it. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Is it this verse, or Rasulullah ﷺ? The Prophet said, he smacks him out of happiness. And he says, that's right. The greatest verse in the Qur'an is the verse of the throne. But why? Why is this the greatest verse in the Qur'an? Who can tell me? What is the subject matter of this ayah, of this verse of the Qur'an? It is the greatest description of Allah. And so the companions knew the highest priority for a new Muslim, for a young adult, for a child, is to know Allah through His names and attributes, in application in their daily lives. And if they don't know Allah, they're in a lot of trouble later on in life. Most crisis of faith or crisis of identity happens due to difficulty. Who knows who's Stephen Hawking? Stephen Hawking, tell me, who's Stephen Hawking? No, you put your hand up, don't look at him. You can't get away with it. Stephen Hawking. Okay, khalas, go on. He deferred to you. Okay, Stephen Hawking is a very prominent scientist who got paralyzed. Can he speak? He can't even speak. He has to use some devices in order to communicate. Stephen Hawking is a scholar in the field of physics, but he's also an atheist. When asked why does he not believe in God, or rather an agnostic, he's not sure. When asked why is he not sure, why doesn't he believe in God, he says, look at this paralysis that I have. What kind of a God would do this to me? And this is the pattern I have seen with many young Muslims. It is when something terrible happens to them in life, they're like, whoa, hold on a second. I don't know if all of this is true anymore. Everything begins to come into question. And this is why everything that you do before that is a preparation for the day a calamity comes and hits you. Because you can't be prepared for that day. When that day comes, then unless you have reached a position of certainty, you'll crumble. One of the greatest examples of people who are ready for the test is the people of Gaza. Right? I saw a video today. A man is standing in rubble. He says, my kids have died, my house is destroyed, but I am certain Allah will grant us victory. What is this? Teach me this. This level of certainty is different. These people are built differently. The people of Gaza are built differently. Because there are people who grew up seeing the test and the torture all the time, and their belief in Allah survived all of that. So now nothing can deter them. Our religion was inherited in culture and in comfort. So the moment a little prick comes, the balloon bursts. So I said the first practical point is understanding the names of Allah and knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this being the number one priority. And if you have not done this in life, do it now. It's not too late. And if you have not done this in life yet, if you've not understood Ayatul Kursi, who is Allah and His names and attributes, you are in for trouble at some point in time in your life. A crisis will come. Trust me. Because this is the foundation of the building. And if the foundation is not solid, the whole building will eventually come crashing down. May Allah protect all of us. The second thing I said is having an approachable relationship whereby a young person can ask a parent, and if not, if that's ruined, then at least find a mentor, a murabbi, an older brother, a friend, somebody where they feel they can talk to. The third thing is being able to learn Iman and learn why we believe what we believe. Every one of us needs to be able to explain why we believe in Allah. Why we believe in Prophet ﷺ and the Prophets before him. Why we pray Salah 5 times a day. Why? Because a generation that grew up in the internet, age of the internet, in the age of TikTok, in the age of post-colonialism, in the age of philosophy, in the age of all these contemporary technologies and all this stuff, they are a generation that asks why. I think my son was 4 years old when he asked me why I pray Salah. I was taken aback. I was hoping I'd have a few more years probation, before he starts asking me these tough questions. The next question was, who created Allah? I thought, Habibi, slow down. You're 4. When I was 4, I know what I was doing, watching Tom and Jerry. This is a different generation. It's a generation that asks why. And so if a parent, or if you don't know why, then get ready. Understanding the reason why you do what you do is one of the greatest sources for coming close to Allah. And for instance, my son one day came home from school and they were indoctrinating him about the environmental friendly and destruction of the environment. There's this ideological kind of brainwashing that happens at school. Multiple things, but one of the things is this idea that he came home, he said, tomorrow we are not driving to school. I said, Habibi, you are 6, you don't give me commandments. You don't give me commandments, I give you commandments. Explain. He said, because you drive to school, you created global warming. I said, me. Let me explain something to you, my son. I created global warming. Come, sit here. Who destroyed the environment? Who destroyed the forests? Who fracked the oceans? Who created all this destruction? It's people who believe that the greatest objective in life is GDP, economic improvement, money, mullah. This is the God that is worshipped. And so they will worship that God at the expense of the forest and the sea and every creation of Allah. I said, the reason the environment is destroyed is because people did not obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they obeyed Allah, they would not destroy the sea, or the ocean, or the fish, or the desert, or the forest. Because they know that their Prophet ﷺ said, the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade harming a small animal, a pigeon. Forget destroying the whole ocean with all the fish in the sea being poisoned. Somebody who believes in Allah on the last day would never do this. The people who are behind this are capitalists, are atheists, are people who worship money. Don't get it wrong. I am driving you to school tomorrow. I am driving you to school tomorrow. But the only way we can save the environment is to bring people back to Allah. His conversation was about what? The environment, eco-friendly, right? Global warming. But this discussion is actually a discussion about Tawheed and about La ilaha illallah. And these are the kind of discussions that you will have. And the idea is to keep having this discussion-oriented, conversation-oriented, a dialogue with people and with yourself to understand why you believe what you believe. The Qur'an is filled with proofs of why we believe. And the prophets and the Sahaba and the Prophet's companions were people who were always looking for an opportunity. How can I increase my level of certainty? We talked about the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. One of the greatest examples is the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam himself. Ibrahim alayhi salam asks Allah an audacious question. قَالَ رَبِّ أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. Oh Allah, show me how you resurrect the dead, please. قَالَ أَوَلَا تُؤْمِنْ. Ibrahim, don't you believe? Why are you asking for live demonstration? Don't you believe? قَالَ بَلَا وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. I believe, oh Allah, but I want increased certainty. Ibrahim alayhi salam is not satisfied with just believing there's a day of judgment and everything will be revived. He says, oh Allah, if it's possible for me to see it, my iman will increase. Show me. And this is the fourth point, practical point. One of the greatest ways to increase your level of certainty, to prevent crises of faith, is to go and see the signs of Allah on this earth. To go and spend time in nature. To go to observatories. To go and study space. To go and read, watch documentaries about nature, about snakes and deers and animals and mountains and seas. Why? One of, if not the greatest way to know someone is to look at the work that they have done. If you were to ask me about a painter, I would say, Habibi, I cannot tell you who this guy is. You got to go look at his painting. Then you will understand the mastery of this person. You ask me about a poet. I say, look, you won't understand until you read the poetry. You ask me about Allah. I will say, you cannot know Allah until you go and see what He has made. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقِ. Allah says, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, command them, go out on the earth, explore the earth and see how creation started. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Go and explore the dead civilizations before you. Go look at the Mayans. Go look at the Egyptians. Go look at all these prehistoric civilizations that died. Go and look at them. Learn from them. Observe them. History. Go and see it with your eyes. Then you will know and you'll become more certain in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the greatest reasons why we are a generation that has these crises and these questions is because we are the generation of the smartphone. A durian farmer in Kelantan from 100 years ago has more iman than most of us in this room. Do you know why? Well, he didn't have a smartphone. Every day he sees Allah creating plants in front of his eyes. Every day Allah creates a durian in his garden. How is he not having high iman? He's connected with the nature of Allah. The seeds, the water, the rain, the plants. You and me, all of this discussion about agriculture is something we've seen in a movie, but we never experience in life. Us being divorced from the creation of Allah is one of the greatest reasons why we have crises of faith. Go and see for yourself what Allah made. Then how can you doubt what Allah made? قُلْ أَفِي اللَّهِ شَكٌّ فَاطِرِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah says, how can you doubt Allah when you know He originated this heavens and the earth? When you reach this level, when Ibrahim alayhi salam wants to reach certainty, what does he do? He's going looking up at the sky. Allah questions us in shock about our behavior in the Qur'an. Allah says, أَفَلَمْ يَنظُرُوا إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَوْقَهُمْ. Why haven't you looked up at the sky? أَفَلَا يَنظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Why haven't you looked at the camel and thought, wow, how did Allah create this hump? وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ. Look at the sky, how was it raised? وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ. Look at the mountains, how are they structured? And look at yourselves. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Look at yourself, human being. Inside you is all the miracles and the signs. خُلِقَ مِن مَّاءٍ دَافِقٍ. You were created from a dirty fluid or a moist fluid. You, high IQ, intelligent, emotions, flesh, skin, bones, hair, thoughts, you were just a piece of fluid. يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب. A piece of fluid that comes between an impure part of the body. Allah made you from that. You think He can't make you again? The Quran is filled with Allah demanding that we use our eyes to contemplate His creation. And this is the greatest way to know and to increase our certainty in Allah and to know Him in the most detail, is to understand what He made. But there are people who will go and look at the creation of Allah and they will not benefit anything from it. Such people, Allah describes them as blind. Not physically blind, they are blind from guidance. Allah says, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَتَكُونَ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. Why don't they go out, explore the earth and think with their hearts? أَوْ آذَانٌ يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. Or listen with their ears. فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ. It is not the eyes that become blind. وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبُ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. But it is the hearts that become blind to the guidance of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ's reaction when he used to think about the creation of Allah, the universe, his reaction, as Bilal radiallahu anhu narrates, one night I came into the house of the Prophet of Allah and he was late for Fajr. And I saw him soaking like somebody poured a bucket of water on his head. You know, like when you go out in the Malaysian rain, tropical rain, and you come fully soaked. This is what he looked like. Somebody poured a bucket, he's dripping. And Bilal said, what happened, Ya Rasulullah? And the Prophet ﷺ says, oh Bilal, do you know what verses Allah revealed to me today? If I tell you what Allah revealed to me today, you will break down. What? What verses could have been revealed that would make the Prophet react in such a way? He's soaking in tears. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah says, in the creation of the heavens and the earth. وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. And in the alternation of night and day. لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. There are signs for people who think. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا. People who think of Allah standing and sitting on their sides. وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. People who think about the creation of Allah in the heavens and the earth. And when they think, the more they contemplate, the more they study the bee and the lion and the mountains and the rocks and the sea and the sun, they only reach one conclusion. رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ. Oh Allah, you could not have done this for no reason. You are far greater than that. سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. So Allah protect us from the fire. So this is another practical point in increasing your level of certainty. Spending time thinking, understanding, watching documentaries, studying the creation of Allah. There's a chapter in the Quran about the bee. There's a chapter in the Quran about the ant. There's a chapter in the Quran about the cow. There's a chapter in the Quran about the spider. Why? What's Allah saying to you? Go and look at what I've made. What are you guys doing? And then you will understand who is the maker. One of the reasons for the question of identity and the question of the crisis that we have, I didn't mention one of the factors before, but it's what I will call the inferiority complex. And I'll give you guys a story that happened to me here in Malaysia. 2 years ago, I came to Malaysia to give a series of talks at universities. And a brother came to pick me up, to take me to the talk. And I was sitting in the car and I said to him, just as we were talking, I said, what's your favorite book? I'm expecting, brother, part of the Muslim Students Association, some kind of Islamic book maybe. He goes, my favorite book is The Prince by Machiavelli. I said, wait, come again? Maybe, I had some jet lag, maybe I didn't hear him properly. Come again? He said, The Prince by Machiavelli. Machiavelli is one of the European liberal philosophers who was responsible for the destruction of religion in Europe. One of the people who hates religion. One of the people who thinks human beings are greedy animals. This is his fundamental understanding of the human being. And he has a book called The Prince, which is about how to manipulate people and how to become powerful through greedy manipulation. I said, brother, this is your favorite book. Why? For God's sake, explain to me, I need to understand why. He said, look, I'm in Malaysia. We're driving. He says, look at this billboard, study in the UK. He says, all the Western universities and the Western thinkers are glorified. And we think they're so smart and they're so advanced. I said, why? Why do you think they're so advanced? He said, because. I said, because what? He said, because the buildings and the infrastructure and the technology and this. I said, and what? I said, so let me get this straight. Advancement is based on technological progress? Okay, I said, what's the most advanced technology in the world today that has the most powerful impact? And let me ask you guys, what do you think is the most advanced technology that can have or has the greatest possible impact to the world today? What do you think it is? It's not the internet and it's not AI. I'm a specialist, I work in the field of AI. That's my day job. It's not AI. There's something more than AI, more powerful than AI in the world today. Not Wikipedia. Not the internet, not AI. Go on. No, Habibi, definitely not. The only power that video games have is controlling your minds. Go on. What is the most powerful technology? Think a technology that can cause life and death in an instant of hundreds of thousands of people. Not social media. Maybe indirectly. Be more specific. The nuclear bomb. What? It's just one button and a whole race is wiped out. Do you think AI is more, ChatGPT is powerful, more powerful? What can ChatGPT do? Answer your question. Come on, guys. Yes, now, the nuclear bomb is the most advanced technology in the world today and has the most widest ranging impact. What good did it bring to the world? Hiroshima, Nagasaki, not far from here. Chernobyl. Advancement is not about technological advancement, but moral advancement. You could have all the tech in the world, but if you are immoral, the tech will destroy you. That's the story of Frankenstein. When we were children, we read the story of Frankenstein. What's the story of Frankenstein? This doctor takes different limbs of the body. It's a fictional story, it's not true. Puts different limbs of the body, creates this remarkable technology, right? And the same remarkable technology gets up one day and kills him. Advanced civilizations, they think that advancement is in technological progress, but what they are producing is a Frankenstein that will come back to bite them. The most advanced civilization is a civilization 1445 years ago, in which the Prophet ﷺ came on the earth. People, they say this, the golden age of Islam. Why? When was the golden age of Islam? When do people think of the golden age? Andalus. Why? Why Andalus? What happened in Andalus for people to say that this is the golden age of Islam? Scientific progress. Who said that that was a marker of advancement? The most advanced civilization was the civilization of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, the civilization of the Prophet ﷺ. Because it's not because they had fast cars and fast clocks and tall buildings, because they were the most moral people on this earth. If you gave them the nuclear bomb, they would not destroy people with it. So I'm explaining to this boy, this young man, and I'm realizing that every colonized people, as Ibn Khaldun says, are obsessed with the colonizer and to become like the colonizer. And every victim of abuse wants to go back to their abuser. It's the same thing. This inferiority complex makes us think that our religion is simple and primitive and other people are advanced. I want to see what David Hume said, and I want to see what Alvin Plantinga said, and all these philosophers said. Why? Kant, so advanced. Let me show you, René Descartes, one of the philosophers, famous philosophers in Europe. This guy was not sure he existed. So he was thinking, like, how do I prove that I exist? I'm thinking. That's why he said the famous statement, I think, therefore I am. MashaAllah, you realize you exist, Shatir. Let me give you an award. This is the stupidity of Western philosophy and advanced civilization. This inferiority complex sometimes causes people to think that what we have is less. And that what we have, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us is primitive and basic and backward and old and ancient. No. It is the most advanced moral code that any human could ever know. وَإِنَّهُ لَكِتَابٌ عَزِيزٌ. It is a dominating revelation. It dominates the world and all ideas and all ideologies. Everything submits to it because the submission to Allah is the greatest form of understanding and advancement. But this is something we have to explain to our kids because they watch Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, startups, tech, AI. Wow, they feel the whole world reached the moon and we're still here learning Kitab al-Tahara. That's how Muslims, I've heard this said to me when I was teaching Kitab al-Tahara in the masjid. Someone said to me, the world has reached the moon and you're still teaching Kitab al-Tahara. And I said to him, you didn't reach the moon and you also didn't learn Tahara. Don't talk to me about Tahara. You did neither. Go back to the sofa, the couch where you came from. So we have to give, shaping the identity of a Muslim. Part of identity is being proud of who you are. As Malays in this country, you always have these kind of like interracial challenges, as every country has. And there is a level of pride. I'm proud that I'm a Malay. This is my Malay tradition and history and culture. I'm an Indian. I'm proud of my Indian history, tradition. And this, but for us to embed in a generation pride in Islam, they need to know who their ancestry is. They need to know the Muslim and Islamic ancestry that they have. They need to understand what happened in Spain. They need to understand who the Sahaba were. And the stories of the Sahaba need to be the bedtime stories every single day. Recently I was talking to somebody, and this person was a taxi driver, and they said, listen brother, I only have 15 minutes a day with my child. I put them to bed. What do I do? I said, excellent. You don't need more than 15 minutes. He said, what? I said, every day, tell them a story. One of the stories of the prophets and the Sahaba. And you know why? These stories, they'll never forget them. And it will be etched in their mind. And they will glorify them. But if you just leave them, they will glorify football players and celebrities and people in the gossip columns and TikTok stars and influencers. Why? There's no alternative. No alternative story was given to them. They don't rate anybody else. You know, one time my own child, he was having this football obsession. And in Manchester, he came to the masjid and we prayed salah. And next to him, a famous football player was praying salah next to him. His name is Benjamin Mendy. He plays for Manchester City. He's a brother, a convert to Islam. He prays in the masjid. After salah, I said to him, I said, look at him. Benjamin Mendy. My son was about to fly out of shock. I said, relax. I said, Benjamin, tell my son, who is your biggest role model? He said, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I said, see, even the footballer submits. Right? If there's no alternative story, narrative given to them, they will automatically submit to the narrative. You see, when European culture disbelieved in God, when Friedrich Nietzsche announced the death of God, or his version of God, and they moved on from God, and they moved on from the prophets, it left such a gap in their lives. They didn't know what to do, so they filled it with Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. Why? Before, the superheroes were the prophets. And in the absence of the prophets, we have to tell ourselves some kind of story, somebody to look up to. So they invented, Marvel and DC invented superheroes. Post-mass atheism in Europe. We don't need those stories. We have better stories. Our prophets may not be flying and seeing through walls and all of this nonsense. And yet, this is the stupidity of these stories. The guy can see through walls and this and this and this, but there is a woman he wants to marry, he can't marry her. What kind of powerless guy is this? Miskeen. Super miskeen. So when I'm telling my children stories, I destroy these superheroes to them. I say, what, Spider-Man can climb walls? What kind of a power is this? He's like a spider. I can crush a spider with my foot. What is this? Nothing to look up to. But Mu'adh ibn Jabal, let me tell you Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Mus'ab ibn Umair, let me tell you about Mus'ab ibn Umair. Lut alayhi salam, Ayub, in a whale, in the sea, Yunus. You don't know the story. Let me tell you the story. Reviving the art of storytelling and the attachment to the role models of the prophets and the attachment to a history, the like of which the world has never seen, the history of Islam. And if we don't tell that story, they will crave other stories. And believe me, the whole world is waiting. From TikTok to Marvel, they're all waiting for your child to come to say, I want a story. Say, I've got it for you. We have to tell the story of the prophets and Sahaba and Tabi'een and the greatest of being. So to summarize this portion, once you've identified the reasons why there are crises of faith and crises of identity, how do you solve them? Number one, by learning the why we believe. Number two, by having an approachable relationship with children. Number three, by exploring the creation of Allah frequently and spending time talking to them about the creation of Allah. Number four, by having a deep understanding about the names of Allah and His attributes. And inshallah on YouTube, if you search my name, Hisham Abu Yusuf, there is a series called The Names of Allah and His Attributes, 33 lessons. It's probably the worst series on this topic on YouTube, but if you can't find anything else, then inshallah you might benefit from it. And number five, the storytelling and learning and understanding the history of Islam and of the prophets and of the companions. So there's something to be proud of. And there's something to relate to and something to say, this is who I am and this is where I'm from and these are my forefathers. And I want to end with one point. If we come back to the beginning question of this lecture, I'm not sure why I am Muslim. I don't know if I chose to be a Muslim or not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا ادخلوا في السلم كافة. O believers, if you haven't done so yet, completely come into submission to Allah. Active. If you were passive all this time and you didn't know what you were doing or why you were doing it, now is the time to become in a state of active submission to Allah. I want to end on this analogy that Iman is like riding a bike. Can you ride a bike without pedaling? What will happen if you don't pedal? It's going to fall over. There is no such thing as a passive believer. The only way to ride the bike of Iman is to keep pedaling hard. Through looking at the signs of Allah, through studying the Qur'an, to studying the why we believe, to looking at the creation of Allah, to being in good company. And this is what keeps the gears going. This is the grease that will continue keeping the gears going. And if you don't pedal and you just let it go, then it just takes one light wind of doubt or desire and that Iman has flown away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us certainty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen our Iman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen our identity. May Allah rid us of Spider-Man and Superman and grant us understanding of Mu'adh and Khadija and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those before them and after them. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. And I'll take your questions inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, barakallahu fikum ya Sheikh for the sharing as well as the reminders. Now we open the floor for Q&A. Tafadhal. Any questions, just raise your hands and we will have the mic pass over.
Assalamualaikum. So coming back to the Gaza example, because I've had a question of where is your God? Why does he allow these things to happen? Aren't Palestinians or Muslims? So why has this continuously gone on? So I kind of lost how to answer this one. So
It's a great question. So everybody heard the question? Yeah? Why? He said, what's happening in Gaza? He's received a question, where is your God and why is all of this going on? The first thing to do is to understand God. The God that we know and that we worship, the true God who created the heavens and the earth, he created it as a test. I'm sure you have a driving license, right? Yes. You might remember your driving test. And when you imagine, you get into the car to do the driving test, you sit down, you close the door, and the examiner tells you, you passed. What? What you were expecting was roundabouts and country lanes and fast roads and slow roads and all this stuff. Why? How will you pass if there's no challenge? By definition, a test is a challenge. You don't go into the test expecting the certificate for free. This is the first thing. To understand not only God, but why God created the heavens and the earth. He created it as a challenge, filled with challenges for all of us. This is the first thing. So there should be no surprise that there are challenges on this earth. Whether it's illness, whether it's mutation, whether it's difficulty, disability, finance, divorce, sleepless nights, health. Everybody has their share. Those are the rules of the game. Now, why does God test us? This is the question, why would a merciful God test us? I'll give you another analogy. Why would a loving parent discipline their child? They want their child to realize and come back. Child's done something wrong, they want them to realize. The child at the time says, my father hates me. He's always hitting me, shouting at me, scolding me, blah, blah, blah. And you say, no, my son, it's because I love you and I want you to improve these things. That's why I'm scolding you. That's why I'm explaining this one, to you. But a child doesn't understand that. They think that a merciful parent means a permanently nice parent. And we know what happens with permanently nice parents. Their children walk all over them like it's a zoo. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also severe in punishment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also the most wise. Part of the wisdom of God is that He tests different people in different ways. And so your test will be different to mine. And my test will be different to his. Now we'll come to the people of Gaza. The people of Gaza are in a test, which God informed us the whole point of this world is a test. You think that the people of Gaza are being tortured and suffering. But God informs us something completely different. How does God describe the people like the people of Gaza? وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ. Do not assume that the people who die in God's path are dead. بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. When they pass, they will be alive with God and He'll be providing for them. Actually, the people of Gaza have it the best out of all of us. Why? We're still here stuck in the test. And the people who passed away in that torture of Gaza are already with Allah in gardens of paradise. They have the better outcome than us. That is God's mercy. God was more merciful to them than to us. But you have to flip the script. You have to look at it from a perspective of the afterlife, not just from a perspective of this life. And what is the alternative? A God that makes a perfect world where we're all drones and everything is lovely? That's called Wall-E. That's a movie. Where everybody's just fat people sitting back and drinking slush all the time. What kind of a life is that? That's not what He promised us. That's not the game. That's not the rules of the game. The rules of the game, this is the rules of the game. It's going to be a test, going to be tough. And out of His mercy, He tests us because we come right back to Him. Out of the furnace come the most pure of diamonds. That's why the people of Gaza are the purest of Iman on this earth. Because they were born and bred in a furnace of test. And they are the purest. And they are the most certain. and they have the strongest trust in Allah. You and me, because we are born in comfort, with air conditioning. This is why we have these crises of faith. But they don't. And they have a better outcome than us. So you will not understand the mercy of God until you open your lens and look at the afterlife as well as this life. And you will not understand the mercy of God until you understand this world was created as a test. Allah knows best. May Allah make it easy for you to explain this onto them, inshallah. Yeah. I'll give you a one-liner. Tell them we only have the pixel and God has the picture. You only have one pixel, but God has the full picture. Allah knows best. Go on. There's another question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
I want to ask, as someone who works in mental health and dealing with individuals who have conditions like autism, ADHD, I often hear concerns about how can I manage to perform my obligatory like salah, reading the Quran, when I struggle to even remember basic needs like eating on time. Yeah, so how do I find support for them or for them themselves to find balance in that struggle? Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair. Tough question. You have to consider yourself, you have to take the prophetic approach, which is to meet people where they are and build them from there. So, you got this person with ADHD, they have the attention span of a goldfish, and they can barely remember their name and barely remember when to eat. So you say, all right, how about one salah a day? Can you do that? You can do that? Great, let's start there. Dhuhr salah. Right after you remember to eat lunch. Bismillah, dhuhr salah. Allah says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. To fear Allah to the best of your ability. Just start there and build. Just as you are building them, getting them to understand how to manage their condition and understand their condition, they need to leverage that to worship Allah in their condition. And that the obligation isn't lifted on them unless they've reached a level of insanity. But build them step by step. In the Prophet ﷺ, Iqra was revealed and he was 40. The obligation of Salah came 10 years later. So if the foundations of Iman are not strong, then for them Salah is just a chore. So maybe you might need to build their Iman first. Okay, don't worry about Salah yet. Let's talk about Allah. Do you know who Allah is? Why do you believe in Allah? Why do you pray in the first place? Let's talk about this first. Once you understand this, it becomes easier for you to pray. And then let's do one prayer. And then two, and then three, and then four. And slowly build them up. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. They say Rome wasn't built in a night. And a believer is also not built in a night. And you need to consider yourself a shepherd that is slowly pushing this flock in the right direction. And may Allah make it easy for you.
Any more questions from the floor?
Hello. Assalamualaikum. My question is, Allah chooses who He guides, correct? So if that's the case, if He chooses not to guide someone, how is it their fault that they're going to end up in hellfire? If that question makes sense.
Yes, it did make sense. He said Allah chooses whom He guides. But the way you need to understand this is it's not prescriptive. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, I don't like the look of your face, khalas, you're condemned. I like this brother, khalas, Jannah. It's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just chose, yeah, I like these guys, Jannah, these guys, I don't like them, Jahannam. And now the rest of it is just a circus. That's not how it works. The way you need to understand the decree of Allah, the first thing that you need to believe in and understand is that we have choices. And anybody who denies that human beings have choices, there's something called a water bottle test. Very simple, no philosophy. What's a water bottle test? You say, brother, what's your name? Kareem. Kareem says, Allah has condemned all of us and decided everything, and I don't know, I don't decide whether I'm going to Jannah or Jahannam. It's all decided for me. I say, okay, Kareem, brilliant, come here. With the bottle. Kareem says, why did you do that? I say, it wasn't my choice. I was decided. I was just involuntary. And obviously he's gonna obviously give me an uppercut after that. Because obviously it's absurd. I chose to hit him. By the way, I've never done this in real life. We don't condone violence, yeah? But why is that test so important? To realize that was a voluntary action. And every day I make voluntary choices that determine my fate. I chose what to look at. I chose to eat that food. I chose what I saw. I know what I saw. I made my decisions. I know why I made my decisions. That's the first thing. It's intuitive, but sometimes if you think about it too much in your head, you can lose that intuition. The first thing, Allah gave you choice. Now, you have a limited set of choices. Like right now, maybe there's 10 different things you could do. But you can't teleport to Brunei. You have a limited set of choices. And that's your test. How do you behave in those set of choices? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu yahdi man yasha wa yudillu man yasha. Allah guides whom He wills and Allah leads astray whom He wills. You need to understand something very important. Crucial to understand this verse. Allah doesn't guide or misguide at random. Nothing Allah does is random. الذي أحسن كل شيء أتقن كل شيء خلقه. Allah does everything with precision. Okay. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there are certain people who are searching for the truth, who have good intentions, who are trying to do good things, or they're trying to search for the truth. Those people, I will make that path easy for them. سَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. There are other people, I give them signs, I give them reminders, opportunities, good options, and every time I give them an option, they take the wrong path. They are people who inherently are defiant people. Those people, given how defiant they are, I will just make that easier for them. That is the meaning of that Allah misguides. Meaning, somebody who has already intended and has demonstrated repeatedly that they are defiant, Allah says, you know what, Habibi, here's the path, you can keep going. These are the people whom Allah says, وَلَوْ يَرَوْا كُلَّ آيَةٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَا. People, if I showed them every miracle, they wouldn't believe. Defiant people. But you defied. So that was a consequence of your defiance that Allah led you further astray. It's called in Arabic istidraj. نَسْتَدْرِجُهُمْ. Allah says in the Quran. You proved your defiance, so I led you astray. How can Allah, the guider, the most merciful, misguide or lead astray somebody who has shown a positive intention? It's the opposite. You show Allah the smallest intention to improve, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens all the doors for you and encourages you and helps you. You see, one way for you to understand this calculation, if you intended to do a good deed, but you just ended up not doing it, you shall get a reward. If you intended to do a bad deed, but you didn't do it, you don't incur any sin. This is the mercy of Allah. The mercy of Allah outweighs His wrath. And so the summary is, number one, for you to understand, you have choices. And all of us make choices that determine our fate. A robber cannot go and stand in court and say, it wasn't me. Allah decreed for me to rob. Because He knew. And He made the plan, and He drove up, and He grabbed the piece, and He ran. He knew exactly what He was doing. And for such people, we give them the water bottle test. The second thing that you need to understand is that Allah guides and leads astray. This is a gift or a punishment based on your behavior. It's not at random. And if you show further defiance, He will lead you further astray. Allah knows best. Barakallahu feekum.
All right, we have one more question. We'll take one more question, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum, Ya Ustaz. I am asking on behalf of this sister here. Her question is, how to deal with abusive parents?
Wow. This is the last question, brother? Last question. Okay. How to deal with abusive parents. I think the first thing is that we need to understand the question in a bit more detail. Why? The reason is that we live in an environment today in which the term abusive has been abused. Yeah, so I tell my son, don't do this. And today we live in this snowflake generation culture where it's like, my father is emotionally abusive. Why? Because he scolded me. Brother, do you know what I received from my parents? It's nothing. What are you talking about? So this is the first thing that we need to understand. What is the form of abuse that's being referred to? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it psychological? What exactly are the parents doing to understand how to deal with it on a case-by-case basis? But here are some general principles. The first general principle is that as children, we know that Allah commanded us to have ihsan, meaning the best possible behavior towards our parents. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give parents that freedom and that privilege for them to abuse us. This was not the reason why Allah gave it to them. So when a parent crosses the boundary, crosses the red line, and exceeds the bounds, and does dhulm, oppresses their children, by excessively beating them, by hurting them, by attacking them, by XYZ, trying to being unjust towards them, the first thing for you to understand is that your parent is sinful for what they have done. And in the sight of Allah, they can never slide doing what they did. Injustice, الظلم ظلمات يوم القيامة. Injustice are darknesses on the day of judgment. It doesn't matter who it comes from and in what form it comes. But how do you deal with this? The first point is, do not respond in like. So parent shouts at you, don't shout back. Parent becomes physical, accept the need to defend yourself, don't strike back. That's the first thing, general principle. Don't give back, or do not take revenge or repel what you have. Number 2 is to protect your sanity and protect yourself from harm. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La darara wa la dirar." Do not harm and do not receive or reciprocate harm. So one of the commandments of the Sharia is, if you have a parent that's, let's say you have an alcoholic parent who comes home drunk and then beats you to shreds, you are fully allowed in the Sharia to lock your door so they don't come in the room. If you know they're going to come and they're going to completely finish you. Because you're protecting yourself from harm which Allah did not sanction. I'm giving a specific example, I'm giving a specific scenario, but it's to illustrate a general point. Protect yourself from harm in whatever way you can. Number 3, patience. Whatever you are going through, one of the worst tests a person can have is to be tested by those in their immediate family. And be inspired by the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, whose father threatened to stone him to death. قال لئن لم تنته لأرجمنك وهجرني مليا. If you don't stop, I'll stone you to death and get out of the house. قال سلام عليك. My father, peace be unto you. I'm going. سأستغفر لك ربي إنه كان بي حفيا. I will ask Allah's forgiveness for you. Allah is always looking after me. وأعتزلكم وما تدعون من دون الله. And I will be completely away from you and what you worship other than Allah. So sometimes when the harm of a parent becomes too excessive, one of the ways to deal with this harm is distance. To reduce the contact, to limit the contact in a way whereby it prevents the harm. These are general principles, but really my advice to any particular person dealing with this, you must speak to the asatidha in this center, Sheikh Hussein, consult for your specific case. Because when it comes to abuse and injustice and stuff like this, every case has a different story and a different solution. And I can only speak in generalities. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Any good is from Allah, any mistake is from myself. Jazakumullah khairan for your time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.